Good morning, everyone. My name is Nur Hidayah Nabila binti Nur Haskin, and I am pleased to present to you today on a subject that is currently one of the most pressing and critical issues in talent acquisition: unconscious bias in recruitment. The hiring process is meant to be a fast system based purely on skill, but evidence confirms that this process is systematically weakened. We are not addressing intentional bias, we are focusing on unconscious bias, a cognitive flaw that creates an unseen wall, preventing us from accessing the best candidates and restraining innovation. Thus, today I will guide you through 6 focus to fully understand this issue. The 6 key focus is: how is unconscious bias defined, the specific types of bias that we face, the powerful psychological forces that create unconscious bias, the major common patterns in how we discuss this problem, the impacts this bias has on our organization, and lastly, the structural strategies we can deploy to reduce its pervasive influence. Now, let's establish a clear foundation for our topic by going through our first focus, which is: how is unconscious bias defined? The most precise definition drawn from academic reviews is that unconscious bias consists of unconsciously held, simplifying, and discriminatory tendencies. To understand it better, let's break these 3 key phrases one by one. Unconsciously held means the biases operate entirely outside of our awareness or intent. Simplifying, on the other hand, is the function of the bias, which means bias exists to simplify the complex decision making. Thus, our brain relies on mental shortcuts to process information quickly. And lastly, discriminatory tendencies means bias often leads to discriminatory outcome, leading to unfair practices. Therefore, unconscious bias in recruitment refers to the automatic use of mental shortcuts that causes decision makers to make inaccurate evaluation of candidates, ultimately favoring sameness instead of true skill or objective qualification. Now that we know what is unconscious bias in recruitment, let's move on to the second focus, which is the specific types of bias we must guard against. We can identify several common forms of bias that sabotage our decision, which is affinity bias, gender bias, confirmation bias, halo or horn effect, and cultural bias. Now, let's go through it one by one. Affinity bias is favoring applicants who remind the recruiter of themselves, for example, by sharing a similar background or education. Gender bias is a systematic preference for one gender over another, often appearing when judging traits like assertiveness or leadership in gender atypical roles. Confirmation bias is actively seeking out information that confirms a pre-existing belief about a candidate, ignoring contradictory evidence. For example, when interviewer receive a resume with a low-ranking university name and then proceeds to ask overly challenging, nitpicky questions during the interview, hoping to confirm their initial belief that the candidate is not intelligent enough. Halo or horn effect means letting one single isolated trait, whether positive or negative, influence the entire assessment. For example, a candidate's impressive past job title leads the interviewer to overlook their lack of required technical skills. This is halo effects. While another candidate's nervousness causes the same interviewer to dismiss their 5 years of perfect experience. This is horn effects. Lastly, cultural bias is the tendency to misinterpret a candidate because they are different from the established cultural norms of the recruiter or organization. For example, a different communication style like an accent. These are the specific types of bias that we face. But to truly mitigate them, we must go through our third focus, which is the powerful psychological forces that create this unconscious bias. These biases are not random errors. They are powered by three strong psychological theories, which is the similarity attraction principle, social identity theory, and relational demography theory. These three theories explain the human desire for sameness that drives bias in hiring. So, the similarity attraction principle. This is the simple fact that we are instinctively more comfortable with and likely to favor people who are like us, sharing a background, education, or even hobbies. It makes the hiring manager feel the interaction will be easier and more predictable. Next, social identity theory, SIT. This theory explains that we categorize the world into our in-groups and out-groups. In-groups are the social groups you belong to and identify with, while out-groups are all the other groups you do not belong to. We favor our in-group members because it boosts our own self-esteem and social identity, leading us to reinforce homogeneity in the workplace. Lastly, relational demography theory, RDT. This is the subconscious assumption that people who share similar characteristics like age or gender will work together more smoothly and cooperate better, sacrificing diversity for perceived team comfort. So, with this knowledge of theories, let's move on to the next focus, which is the major common factors in how we discuss this problem. A systematic review found that the discussion often falls into four overly simplistic common patterns of discussion, which is the biased individuals, bias as binary, bias in moments of decision, and bias as fixable issue. The biased individual refers to the trend to blame the single recruiter, neglecting the organizational system and culture. Bias as binary is the overly simplistic tendency to see the complex problem of bias only in terms of two opposite groups, ignoring the reality that individuals face discrimination based on the combination of their multiple identities. Bias in moments of decision is focusing only on the interview, ignoring that bias is embedded throughout the entire recruitment pipeline. Lastly, bias as a fixable issue is the assumption that a one-time training session can cure a deep-seated cognitive flaw. This critical failure to address the problem correctly leads to the fifth focus, which is the impacts this bias has on our organization. The first impact is restrained innovation and groupthink. This means by hiring people who think alike, the organization loses creative tension, leading to groupthink and limiting its ability to solve complex problems. The second impact is reduced organizational performance. This refers to the failure to hire the most qualified candidate negatively impacts overall team and organizational productivity. The third impacts are workforce homogeneity. This systematic bias towards the familiar leads to reduced diversity and a workforce that fails to represent the global market. The last impact is legal and reputational risk, which is a failure to implement fair hiring practices increases the risk of costly discrimination lawsuits. Moving on to the last focus, which is the structural strategies we can deploy to reduce its pervasive influence. Since elimination is impossible, our goal is minimization through structural change. The strategy is multi-phase. The first phase is process formalization. This phase focuses on standardizing the recruitment procedure to remove subjective human judgment. It can be structured interviews or blind screening. A structured interview is a standardized process where all candidates are asked the exact same predetermined questions and their answers are scored against the same objective criteria. while blind screening is the process of removing identifying details like names, age, and gender from application to force recruiters to focus solely on the candidate skills and qualification. The next phase is a systemic vigilance, which is a strategy involves auditing the entire organizational pipeline to ensure bias doesn't creep into the system inputs or outputs. It can be done by auditing job advertisement language for unintended bias, treating AI algorithms with extreme caution, and address bias at the end stage to prevent microaggression in the integration process. Microaggressions are brief everyday actions or comments that communicate a hostile or negative slight toward minority groups. The last phase is cognitive and cultural shift. This strategy involves changing the way people think and making a long-term commitment to continuous learning and reflection. Organizations may use diversity training to raise awareness and shift the organization culture. In conclusion, the issue of unconscious bias in recruitment is not an abstract concept. It is a critical organizational threat as it leads to groupthink, stifles innovation, and prevents organizations from leveraging the full potential of a diverse talent pool. The analysis of this issue shows that the solution is not to simply fix the individual but to fix the system by deploying robust, structured, and objective processes at every single stage of talent acquisition. By formally addressing and mitigating this bias, we move beyond mere compliance. We fulfill our duty to build an organization that is truly competitive, innovative, and reflective of the diverse world we operate in. That is all from me. Thank you.